On a cold morning, 78-year-old Helen unknowingly rescues an abandoned German shepherd named Teddy. But as Teddy grows closer to her, Helen begins to notice strange, almost human-like behavior. He seems to understand commands she never taught. One night, two thieves break into her house, and Teddy suddenly shows incredible protective instincts. Before continuing the story, tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far this video has come. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, so I can send you exciting stories like this every day. It was a cold morning in Fairview, a small town where time seemed to stand still. Helen Whitmore, a 78-year-old woman, had lived alone in a modest home since her husband passed away nearly 2 decades ago. On one of her regular walks through the neighborhood, she came across something that would change her routine. A German shepherd, thin, with dirty fur and an exhausted look. He was lying near a trash can, shivering from the cold. Helen hesitated for a moment, but her kind heart wouldn't let her walk away without helping him. "Come here, big guy." "I can't leave you here," Helen said, cautiously reaching out her hand. To her surprise, the dog approached without fear, as if he understood that this woman was his chance to survive. She took him home, gave him a bath, food, and a blanket to rest. For days he remained quiet, but his eyes spoke of something deep, as if he was hiding a story she couldn't quite understand. Helen named him Teddy, a simple name for a companion who would soon become essential in her life. As Teddy recovered, Helen began noticing some intriguing behaviors. He seemed to understand commands like sit or stay without her ever teaching them. When she dropped a metal object, he picked it up with precision and placed it back in her hands. "You must have been well trained," she commented, petting his head. Despite all of this, Helen never questioned the dog's past. To her, he was simply a miracle that arrived at the right time to fill the emptiness in her life. While Helen was forming a special bond with Teddy, two men were watching her house from a car parked across the street. Tommy and Liam, known for small thefts in the area, saw Helen as an easy target. "She lives alone. She's probably keeping money or something valuable inside," Tommy commented while Liam nodded with a sly smile. They had no idea that the elderly woman had a protector with skills far beyond what they could imagine. That night, while Helen was reading a book in the living room, Teddy lay beside her, alert to every sound. He seemed to always be on high alert, as if he could sense danger before it even happened. Helen, unaware, was stroking his soft fur, amused by the dog's devotion. Little did she know fate was about to test that bond in a terrifying way. Night had fallen over Fairview, bringing with it a silence broken only by the occasional sound of leaves blown by the wind. Inside Helen's house, Teddy lay at the feet of the elderly woman, but even with his eyes half closed, his ears were alert. Outside, Tommy and Liam were hiding behind a nearby bush, watching the lights in the living room go out. "The old woman must be asleep by now," Tommy whispered, a confident smile on his face. Liam adjusted the makeshift mask he was wearing. "We go in, grab whatever we can, and get out fast. Simple." The two men moved around the side of the house, where a low window invited them to break in. Tommy used a tool to force the lock, while Liam kept a wary eye on their surroundings. Inside, Teddy perked up his ears. The sound of metal scraping set his instincts into motion. Without making a sound, he got up and moved into the hallway, where he could keep an eye on both the living room and the house's entrance. Helen was sleeping deeply in the armchair, unaware of what was about to happen. Tommy managed to open the window and both of them slipped in quietly. With small flashlights, they began rummaging through drawers and furniture in search of anything valuable. "Hurry, grab anything that shines," Tommy said as Liam found a small box with a few old pieces of jewelry. The job seemed easy, and they were convinced no one would disturb them. What they didn't know was that Teddy was already aware of their presence, watching them from a dark corner of the room. Suddenly, the sound of a deep growl echoed through the room, cutting the silence like a knife. Tommy froze, and Liam quickly turned his head toward the direction of the sound. "What was that?" Liam whispered, his voice trembling. Teddy stepped out of the shadows, his eyes glowing in the lantern light. He was growling quietly, every muscle tense, as if ready to attack at any moment. "It's just a dog," Tommy murmured, trying to sound confident, but his voice betrayed his fear. "Get him away." When Liam took a step forward to intimidate Teddy, the German shepherd lunged like lightning. He grabbed Liam's pant leg, knocking him down with ease. Tommy tried to react, but Teddy growled so loudly that the man hesitated. "Get off me!" Liam yelled, struggling to break free. But Teddy kept his grip, showing he wasn't an ordinary dog. Desperate, Tommy grabbed a chair and tried to use it to push the dog away. But Teddy dodged with agility, never losing control of the situation. Helen woke up startled by the screams. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice shaking as she turned on the room light. Upon seeing the two men on the floor and Teddy in control, she quickly understood what was happening. "Thieves," she murmured, feeling a mix of fear and indignation. Teddy, realizing his owner was awake and safe, released Liam, but continued growling, blocking any attempt to escape. Tommy grabbed his friend by the arm and shouted, "Let's get out of here." With effort, they escaped through the window they had entered, leaving behind their failed plan and the fear of returning. The next morning brought a sense of unease to Helen. As the sun lit up the small room, she watched Teddy, who still seemed on high alert, sitting by the window like a sentinel. The signs of the previous night were everywhere. Open drawers, objects scattered on the floor, and the back window still half open. Helen sighed, stroking Teddy's fur. "You saved me, boy." "But who are you really?" she murmured, more to herself than to the dog. Determined to understand more about the animal, who seemed to have extraordinary abilities, Helen did something she had never done before. She took Teddy to the town's veterinarian, Dr. Bradley, hoping for some answers. In the office, as the vet examined the German Shepherd, he frowned when he noticed something unusual. "Helen, he has a microchip. Would you like me to scan it to see where he's from?" he asked. Helen hesitated for a moment, but she knew she needed to know more. "Please go ahead," she replied. What the microchip revealed left Helen stunned. The vet looked at the monitor and said, "Teddy isn't just any dog. He used to belong to a police unit here in the area. According to the records, he was partnered with an officer named David Turner, but he went missing during an operation a year ago. It seems they thought he was dead." Helen looked at Teddy, surprised. "You were a hero before you showed up on my porch," she whispered, feeling a new wave of admiration for the dog. Without wasting any time, Dr. Bradley contacted David Turner, Teddy's former partner. Just a few hours later, David arrived at the office looking stunned. He was a tall man with gray hair and a strong build, but his eyes were filled with emotion as he saw Mac. "I can't believe it. This is Teddy," David said, kneeling down to pet the dog. Teddy, who had been on alert until then, wagged his tail and licked the man's hand as if he recognized him. David explained everything to Helen as the three of them sat in the office. Teddy had been trained for special operations, including drug detection and rescue missions. During a mission, the car he was in crashed, and everyone assumed Teddy had died. "He must have survived and wandered until he found you," David said. "This dog isn't just a companion. He was trained to protect and serve, and it looks like he's still doing that." Helen felt a mix of relief and concern. Knowing that Teddy had such a complex past explained his intelligence and behavior, but it also raised a new question. Did the men who invaded her house know what they were up against? "David," she said, her voice worried. "What if they come back?" David looked at Teddy, then at Helen, his expression serious. "If they come back, they won't just have Teddy to deal with. I'll make sure you and him are protected." After the emotional reunion with David Turner, Helen felt a strange mix of safety and unease. She knew Teddy was special, but she also knew the danger was still lurking. The thieves could come back, maybe with more courage or better preparation. David, sensing her worry, insisted on walking her home. "I'm not leaving you alone tonight," he said, holding tightly to Teddy's leash, which seemed to understand every word. At her house, David began inspecting the place. "This back window needs a stronger lock," he commented, pointing to the spot where the thieves had entered. Helen, sitting in the armchair, looked at him with gratitude. "I didn't expect such kindness, David. You don't even know me." He smiled gently. "Helen, anyone who gave Teddy a second chance deserves this and much more." As they worked to reinforce the house's security, Teddy followed them, alert to every sound around him. Meanwhile, Tommy and Liam were in an abandoned warehouse on the other side of town, discussing what went wrong. It was just an old lady's house. "How did that dog take us down?" Liam asked, massaging his ankle that Teddy had injured. Tommy, more frustrated than ever, slammed his fist on the rusty table. "I'm not letting this slide. If we go back with more people, that dog won't stand a chance." They decided to gather 2 more associates and return to finish what they had started. That same night, David realized that something bigger might be approaching. He set up a sort of trap with Teddy's help. "If they try to come in again, we'll know," he said while attaching thin wires connected to makeshift bells at the entrances of the house. He also positioned simple security cameras he had brought with him, something Helen found a bit excessive. "David, isn't this a bit much for an old lady like me?" she asked. He replied firmly, "Helen, it's not just about you. Teddy is a threat to them now, and they might want to eliminate him." Night fell, and the house seemed surrounded by a tense silence. Helen tried to read, but David sitting by the front door and Teddy patrolling the hallway didn't let her relax. "You know," Helen began, trying to ease the tension, "I never thought my peaceful life could turn into a battlefield. It feels like something out of a movie." David chuckled softly. "Sometimes a peaceful life is the biggest target. It's where the unexpected likes to strike." Outside, Tommy and his cohorts were already positioned, waiting for the right moment to strike. They believed the elderly woman would be sleeping again, unaware that this time there was surveillance in place. Teddy, who had been resting at Helen's feet, suddenly lifted his head. He heard something. David noticed the dog's behavior and placed his hand on the holster of his gun. "They're here," he murmured. Helen felt her heart race as Teddy took his position. The second battle was about to begin. The tension inside the house was almost tangible. Teddy stood motionless, like a statue, ears perked and eyes fixed on the direction of the back window. David held the gun, not drawing it from its holster, staying alert to the slightest sound. Helen, sitting in the armchair, watched everything with her heart racing. "David, what do we do now?" she whispered. "We wait," he replied calmly, "and we trust Mac." Outside, Tommy led the group. He signaled for the other 2 men to position themselves at different entrances of the house. Liam, still limping slightly, murmured, "This is crazy, Tommy. That dog nearly tore me apart last time." Tommy shot him an angry look. "This time we're ready. We get in, take care of the dog, and grab everything we can." They started to move silently, trying to avoid any alarms or reactions. However, Teddy was already 1 step ahead. When the first thief tried to force the back window, a faint clink echoed through the house. David's makeshift wire had worked. Teddy growled, a low sound, but filled with threat, and ran toward the noise. "Helen, stay here," David said, quickly getting up and following the dog. He positioned himself near the kitchen, where he saw the window being pushed open. The dog positioned himself near the kitchen, where he saw the window being pushed open. Tommy, realizing that the element of surprise had been lost, made a risky decision. He pushed the window harder, jumping inside with a flashlight in hand. "I warned you," David murmured, pulling out his gun and aiming it. "Get out of here now." Tommy froze for a moment, but then grinned cynically. "You're not going to shoot me. This is just a warning to scare me." Before David could respond, Teddy leaped forward, hitting Tommy with enough force to knock him down. The flashlight fell to the floor, casting light on the thief's expression of pure terror. Meanwhile, the other 2 accomplices were trying to force the front door, but struggled with the reinforced lock. Liam outside heard Tommy's screams and hesitated. "Maybe we should run," he suggested. But the third thief, more determined, pushed the door hard, breaking it open. "It's too late to turn back now," he said as he entered. However, as soon as they stepped into the house, they were met by Teddy, who was now patrolling frantically among the intruders. Chaos took over the place. Teddy, trained to protect and incapacitate threats, attacked with precision, while David covered the remaining entrances. Helen, despite her fear, remained firm, holding the phone and ready to call the police. When the third thief tried to move toward the living room, Teddy blocked his path, knocking him down with a precise blow. "This isn't going to end well for you," David said coldly, and for the first time Tommy realized he might have underestimated both the elderly woman and her extraordinary dog. The tension in the room reached its peak. Teddy, with his imposing stance and eyes locked on the intruders, seemed invincible. Tommy, lying on the floor, was trying to get back on his feet while David kept his gun aimed at him. "I told you to get out of here," David warned again, his voice low and threatening. On the other side of the room, the other 2 thieves appeared uncertain. Teddy's presence, now moving among them like a predator, kept them frozen in place. Tommy finally got up, holding the arm Teddy had struck. "You think you can intimidate us with just that dog and a gun?" he said, trying to sound confident, but his voice was shaking. David took a step forward. "I don't need to intimidate. You've already lost. The police are on their way." It was a lie, but it was enough to make Liam's eyes widen. "What?" "He called the police," he whispered to his partner, who was now beginning to hesitate. Meanwhile, Helen, hidden behind a door in the hallway, watched the events unfold. She held the phone tightly, ready to dial the emergency number, but decided to trust David and Teddy for a few more minutes. Her heart raced with every movement of Teddy, who was positioning himself strategically to protect the house and block the escape routes. "You'll never leave this house without paying for what you did," Helen muttered to herself, finding an unexpected courage. Tommy, realizing he was at a disadvantage, decided to act impulsively. He charged at David, trying to disarm him. However, Teddy reacted faster. With a precise leap, he grabbed Tommy's leg and knocked him down again, making him scream in pain. Liam, terrified, took a step back and tripped over a chair, crashing to the floor with a loud thud. The third thief tried to move along the side of the room, but David spun around, aiming his gun directly at him. "I won't repeat myself." "Get out now," David said, his voice firmer than ever. The confusion escalated when one of the thieves attempted to escape through the back window. Teddy, however, was already there, growling and blocking the way. Tommy, now completely defeated, began to beg. "Please, man, just let me go. We don't need any trouble." David didn't respond immediately, letting the weight of silence hang in the air. He then looked at Helen, who had stepped out from the hallway and was now standing next to him. "Do you think we should let them go, Helen?" he asked. Helen, with a serious expression, looked at the men lying on the floor and at Teddy, who was waiting for further orders. "No," she replied firmly. "They broke into my house and put our lives at risk. They need to face the consequences." David nodded in agreement and asked Helen to call the police. As the sound of sirens drew nearer, Tommy and his accomplices realized they had lost. Teddy, with his imposing presence, stood guard, ensuring that no one would escape before justice arrived. Leave your comment below and tell us your expectations for what comes next. Will Teddy and Helen finally find peace? Don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends who also love thrilling stories like this. And of course, subscribe to the channel to keep up with everything firsthand. The red and blue lights illuminated the quiet street of Fairview, breaking the silence of the early morning. Two police cars parked in front of Helen's house while curious neighbors peered through their windows. David slowly opened the door, keeping the thieves under watch. Teddy, standing next to him, remained still but alert, ready to react to any attempt to escape. Tommy, Liam, and the third accomplice were huddled in the corner of the room, their faces filled with defeat and fear. The first officer to enter was Sergeant Miller, a robust and experienced man known for his firm stance. "David Turner? What's going on here?" he asked, clearly surprised to see his former colleague in uniform. "These three broke into Helen's house. They were armed with burglary tools. But luckily, Teddy and I managed to hold them off," David explained. The sergeant glanced at Teddy, who seemed to almost understand that his presence was crucial. The officers handcuffed the thieves one by one. Liam tried to argue. It was a misunderstanding. "We didn't want to hurt anyone," he said, but the sergeant simply rolled his eyes. "Tell that to the judge," he replied coldly, pushing Liam toward the patrol car. Tommy, still with his pants torn and marks from Teddy's teeth, glared at the dog with pure hatred. "That thing's a monster," he muttered, but none of the others seemed to agree with him. As the thieves were taken away, Helen finally relaxed. Sitting in her favorite armchair, she sighed, feeling the weight of the tension melt away. David sat next to her, with Teddy lying at their feet. "You were amazing, Helen," David said, smiling at the lady. "You were the one who kept calm and let Teddy do what he does best." She stroked the dog's head and smiled gently. "I never thought I'd be so grateful to have found this lost dog on my porch." Outside, Sergeant Miller approached David before leaving. "I didn't know you were so involved in this, but it looks like you're still the same. Always protecting people?" David shrugged. "I just did what needed to be done. And Teddy, he deserves the credit. He's special." The sergeant nodded, watching the German Shepherd one last time before getting in the car. "He's not just special, He's a hero. With the house quiet again, David began removing the makeshift traps and security cameras he'd set up. Helen, still holding the phone, looked at Teddy and David with tears in her eyes. "You saved my life tonight. I don't know how to thank you." David shook his head. "No need to thank us, Helen. Teddy and I just did what was right." And as he prepared to leave, Helen realized she wasn't alone anymore. She had Teddy, her faithful protector, and now also a new friend in David. The following morning brought a quiet relief to Helen. The sunlight streamed into the room, illuminating the remnants of the battle from the night before. Overturned chairs, a broken window latch, and papers scattered around. Teddy lay next to his owner, his eyes half closed but alert, as if still ready to react to any threat. Helen gently stroked his head. "You're my hero, Teddy," she said with a tired smile, feeling safer than ever before. Soon after, David returned to check on Helen. He brought bags with reinforcements for the house locks and tools to help with the repairs. "Good morning," he said as he entered. "I hope you managed to get some sleep." Helen chuckled softly. "With Teddy by my side, it was easier than I thought." David looked at the German shepherd, who responded by wagging his tail. "He doesn't just protect Helen, he's loyal to the end," David remarked as he began working on the windows. As they worked together, Helen took the opportunity to learn more about Teddy's past. David shared stories of the missions he and Teddy had completed, from search and rescue operations to dangerous missions against armed criminals. He was more than a partner. "He was my family," David said, a melancholic gleam in his eyes. Helen realized how much Teddy had meant to him. "It must have been hard to lose him, to think he hadn't survived," she commented. David nodded. "It was like losing a part of me, but now I see that he found the place where he was meant to be." As they were talking, Helen couldn't help but wonder how Teddy had survived during that year before finding her. "Do you think he still misses that life?" she asked, looking at Teddy, who seemed so comfortable here with her. David smiled. "Teddy is a service dog, Helen. He feels like he needs a mission, but with you he found something different, a home. I think that's more than he could ever ask for." Outside, some neighbors started to appear, curious about the events of the previous night. Mrs. Baker, who lived next door, called out to Helen from the fence. "Helen, I saw the police last night. Is everything okay?" Helen went to the door to talk. "It was a long night," she answered with a sigh, "but Teddy took care of everything." The neighbor looked at the dog with admiration. "He's really special," she commented. The small group of neighbors gathered around, listening to the story and praising Teddy's courage. By late morning, after the repairs were done, David sat beside Helen once more. "You're strong, Helen, much stronger than you think," he said as she poured 2 cups of tea. "With Teddy by my side, I think I can face anything," she replied. And for the first time in many years, Helen felt something she thought she had lost, a true sense of safety and belonging. With the repairs completed and the thieves captured, Helen's life began to return to normal, but in a transformed way. Teddy's presence had become a constant source of comfort and security, and the events of the past few nights made Helen realize something important. She was no longer the solitary woman she once thought she was. Teddy had brought a new perspective to her life, and with David's help, she felt more connected to the community around her. David started visiting Helen regularly, creating an informal routine of companionship and support. He always brought something useful: groceries, tools, or, on one special occasion, a new ID tag for Teddy, which included Helen's name and address. "Now he's officially yours," David said, handing over the gift. Helen smiled, touched. "I feel like he always has been." "Thank you, David." Meanwhile, Teddy seemed to relax more with each passing day, though he still kept his instincts sharp. He began exploring the yard more often, playing with the toys Helen bought for him. Still, at the slightest strange noise or unexpected visitor, he would instantly assume a protective stance, showing that his loyalty had not wavered. Helen watched all of this with a mix of pride and affection. The story of the heroic German shepherd and the invasion of Helen's house spread quickly through the neighborhood. Soon, Teddy became something of a local celebrity. Children and adults would walk by the fence, calling for him and asking permission to pet him. Helen, once seen as a reclusive woman, was now constantly visited by neighbors eager to hear more about her experience. For her, this brought a sense of belonging that she hadn't felt in a long time. However, Helen knew that life was also full of changes and possibilities. In one of their conversations, David revealed that he was thinking about going back to work, perhaps in a more administrative role at the police department. "Taking care of you and Teddy reminded me how much I like protecting people," he confessed. Helen nodded, understanding his desire to return to an important part of his life. "You're a protector, David. And not just for me," she said with a gentle smile. With David reevaluating his future and Teddy fully integrated into his new life, Helen began to plan small changes of her own. She decided to participate in community events and even accepted an invitation to a local book club meeting. For the first time in years, she felt like she was rebuilding her life, and Teddy was at the heart of that transformation. She petted the dog and whispered, "You didn't just save my life, Teddy. You gave me a new one." The days that followed brought peace to Helen and Teddy. Their routine was now filled with small moments of happiness, from morning walks around the neighborhood to encounters with neighbors who always stopped to greet the famous dog. Helen felt more alive than ever, and Teddy's constant presence was a daily reminder of how life can change unexpectedly, sometimes for the better. On a sunny afternoon, David showed up with a special gift, a simple wooden plaque, carefully carved with the inscription, "Home of Teddy, the Hero." He handed it to Helen with a smile. "I think this sums up what this place means now," he said. With tears in her eyes, Helen hugged him tightly to thank him. The plaque was immediately placed at the entrance of the house, where everyone who passed by could see it. Despite the calm, Helen knew that Teddy still carried traces of his previous life as a police dog. In a moment of introspection, as she watched him play in the yard, she wondered if he missed that routine of action and danger. But when Teddy ran to her, wagging his tail and with a look that seemed to overflow with affection, she knew he was exactly where he wanted to be. He had chosen this home and this life by her side. David, who was now more involved in community life, continued to support Helen and Teddy whenever possible. Although he was planning to return to the police force, he promised that his friendship with Helen and his bond with Teddy would remain intact. "We're a team, Helen. We always will be," he said during one of his visits. She smiled, feeling a new sense of trust and belonging. "Yes, David, and Teddy is our link." The neighbors, who had once barely known who Helen was, now treated her as an essential part of the community. They helped reinforce her house, bringing tools and even organizing a small event to honor Teddy. On the day of the celebration, Helen watched proudly as the children played with the dog, and David told stories about the impressive training he had received. For Helen, this was the kind of joy she never expected to experience again. That night, as the sun set, Helen sat on her porch with Teddy by her side. She looked at the horizon, feeling the warmth of a life well lived and the comfort of safety beside her protector. "You've saved my life more than once, Teddy," she said, gently stroking his head. "And I promise I'll take care of you for the rest of yours." The German Shepherd lifted his head, as if understanding every word, and wagged his tail. To the end, the story of Teddy and Helen is a powerful reminder of the unconditional love and loyalty shared between humans and animals. Teddy wasn't just a companion, but a devoted protector who stood by Helen's side, never leaving her, even in the most dangerous moments. His actions reflected a deep bond, one that only a human and an animal can form. A love that doesn't require words, but simply presence and absolute trust in each other. Their story reminds us that love can come from the most unexpected places, and the creatures by our side can become our strongest allies, protecting us through any hardship. If you felt the love in this story and want to discover more heartwarming tales of human-animal bonds, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on more fascinating and inspiring videos. Thank you for watching this story, and we hope to see you with us in the next videos.